Fort Worth recently surpassed 1 million residents and is now the 10th largest city in the entire United States. But most people don't realize how much is actually spread across these 350 square miles. So today I'm putting together the complete city map tour. We're talking about the neighborhoods, the major employers, highways, attractions, and just how everything connects. Because whether you end up in Fort Worth proper or a surrounding suburb, this is definitely a video that you're going to want to watch first. Now, my name is Devin with the Fort Worth Blueprint, and today I'm giving you the real deal on how Fort Worth is laid out and what you need to know before you actually make the move. So let's go. Here we have a map of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And you can see Dallas and Fort Worth there. So one of the things that I really want to start and preface this whole thing is really just how large Fort Worth is, because until you're actually here, you don't really think that it's that big. But in looking at it here, we can see Fort Worth is outlined. So this is 350 square miles. So Fort Worth really stretches more so north-south, but you can see it does have some pretty good reach, east and west as well. But I just wanted to kind of lay this out here so that we can see kind of how big it is, and then the proximity as well also to Dallas. So, the size is really one of those things that really does confuse people at first. So it's really good to be able to show that. And another thing, like I mentioned, is I wanted to show the proximity to Dallas. So looking at this map, we can see here that, Fort Worth and Dallas are about 30 miles apart. If I was to go over here and type in downtown Dallas, kind of go from there and then do downtown Fort Worth. We can kind of see here that, the fastest route a lot of times is going to be, about that hour. It looks like it's on rain. Let's get driving. There we go. So we can see here now that, the fastest route is going to be about 33 miles. And right now it's 33 minutes, but I am recording this a little bit later in the day. So as we can see, there's no traffic. If this was 8 a.m. or even, late afternoon, you would see a lot of red and yellow here because this does get pretty congested. And I'll go over the highways here a little bit later, but I just really wanted to show that. Another thing that I really want to show, which is important for a lot of people, is what the proximity is to the airport. So that's another huge one for a lot of people. And I want to do everything from downtown. So if we do the first airport, which is Dallas Fort Worth International, which is going to be, your main hub, your one of the biggest airports in the country, one of the busiest, are going to fly out of here. And so if you go from downtown right now, it's about 20 minutes, right? So again, if you add in that traffic, if you're coming from downtown or maybe South Fort Worth or even north, depending on the way that you go, you're going to be looking at probably about 30-ish at peak times, 40 minutes. But there's multiple highways to get there, so that's good. But just the overall city of Fort Worth isn't too far from DFW. And then if we go a little bit further out, we can see a smaller airport here, which is more so on the Dallas side, Dallas Love Field. So if you're big on Southwest, if you're a Southwest flyer, then you would be flying out of Love Field. Places like American and those are going to be flying out of DFW. So Love Field's here. Love Field's going to be a little bit further for you. Let's kind of pull it up there. So we can see Love Field's going to be about 32 miles with no traffic. You're looking at about 30 minutes. So again, add on probably about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the time of day. And you're going to be looking at a little bit more time there. That's definitely something that, you want to keep an eye on. But Fort Worth is definitely in a great location for both of them. They're not too far. Most times you're not driving an hour or anything, 20, 40 minutes, I think probably tops. All right, so as we get back and we're looking at Fort Worth, the first thing I want to say, the first place that I really want to, really show are the highways, because there's so many highways that can get extremely confusing. And again, the time of day really plays a huge part, on these highways. So the first one I really want to look at is one of the major highways that's going to stretch north and south, and that's going to be 35 West. Let me go ahead and draw it here. So 35 West is going to be right here, and it's going to stretch your north and south. So it's going to take you from Burleson, which is right here, or North Fort Worth, or like the Kellers or the Saginaws if you're in a suburb. It's going to take you from there all the way into downtown. Okay. Now there are two options for this highway. You're going to have your non-tolls. Okay. And then this is also going to be a toll highway as well that you will see. And I'll get into tolls a little bit more, but just remember the blue is going to be for the tolls. So, if you live in, North Fort Worth or whatever it is, and you're likely going to be taking this highway, I take it every day for work. And I can tell you that it's okay. But depending on your time of day, again, if you're leaving in the morning or if you're late afternoon or whatever it is, you're going to run into bottlenecks. This is one of the busier highways. So I can tell you, so here's downtown right here. So you're going to run into bottlenecks about here, right before you get into downtown. And then if you're coming from the north, definitely about here, and then again here. Now these two aren't as bad. These two are probably about 10-15 minutes maybe max. This is the one right here that can get a little bit tricky. It can take a little bit longer. So that's just kind of something that you want to prepare for, especially if it's like a weekend and you have folks going downtown or the West 7th or whatever it is. Then this area right here can get pretty congested. Another highway that I really want to point out is 30. So 30 is a nice one because it'll take you east and west pretty much as far as you want to go. So if we go here, here's 30. Oh, that's a horrible line. Let's try it again. All right, here's 30, and it just stretches all the way into Dallas. So 30 is going to be nice. It's going to get you east and west. And like I said, it's going to be one of the main routes to get you into Dallas. Again, there's about 3 different highways to get you into Dallas. But if you're coming from downtown, 30 is going to be the easiest. You also have 20 here that you can take. Then you'll have to come up 35 east a lot of times, or 67 here to get into Dallas if you ever wanted to, or to go to like Arlington or something like that. But then we also have 183 and 820. So 820 here goes into 183 and then to 35 east into Dallas. So those are some of your main ones, kind of going into Dallas and going east and west, north and south. And then we also have one of the big ones here, which is Chisholm Trail Parkway. So Chisholm Trail Parkway is going to be a toll road, but this toll road is going to get you coming from, let's say, downtown. If you choose to live in South Fort Worth, if you choose to live in places like Burleson or Crowley that we see here, this is going to be a really good option, right? Because again, 35 West, especially around here, once we get to Burleson, like in here, there's a real bad bottleneck and traffic jam as well. So taking this toll road can really save you a bunch of time. And then there's just some other highways here. And if I was to zoom in, let me see, clear those drawings. And then we kind of zoom in here, we can see where 35 West and 30 meet kind of right in here. And you can see all this kind of jumbled up mess that kind of takes you in a bunch of different directions, right? We have our routes out to Arlington, our routes down to Midlothian or Burleson. We have our routes out to Dallas. So there's just a bunch of different routes, and it's not as overwhelming as you think. We've been here for going on 3 years now, and I think I've got the highways down pretty packed. So, not too bad. Not too bad. So one thing about Fort Worth is everything is going to really flow from downtown, right? So downtown is going to be where you're going to have a lot of your businesses, a lot of your entertainment, just like a traditional downtown. Now, it's not Dallas's downtown, but, it is one that, really has some things going for it. So if we look at downtown Fort Worth, we have, a couple different, let's see what we got here. Let's zoom out a little bit. So we have a couple different, you're going to have a lot of your businesses and things like that. But one thing that I do want to really highlight is Sundance Square. Now, Sundance Square is a place where, folks come to gather. There's a lot of events, shopping, entertainment, things like that. It's going to be your most walkable option when you get to downtown, right? Now, if I click on some of the pictures here, there's one that I really like. This one here, it really gives you a sense of what, Sundance Square is, which is just a huge gathering place for folks, and, people really like it. And, it's a really good time. It's a really good time. One thing that I definitely want to mention is the Bass Performance Hall. So this is also in Sundance Square. So if you're into, live performances, orchestras, ballets, jazz, whatever it is, Bass Performance Hall is going to be a great place, to be. It's a really nice venue. And there's also another spot that I wanted to point out. Let me see if I can find it again on here. It is a new development that's coming, actually, which is called Panther Island. So you may have heard of it. So Panther Island, in short, is it's going to be one of the long-term and bigger developments that are going to be happening here in Fort Worth. It's not supposed to happen for some years now, but it's basically where Fort Worth is going to, for lack of a better term, get its own version of the San Antonio Riverwalk. And so that's definitely a project that, you'll definitely want to look out for and read up on, because, depending on where you move to, if you move to Fort Worth proper, or if you spend a lot of time in that area, then it could have some effects on your commute, on your travel, but again, some long-term benefits. So definitely look at Panther Island if you were looking at the area. Another spot that I love here, which is very unique to Fort Worth, is called the Fort Worth Stockyards. And so the Stockyards is a place where you'll see, kind of that true Western cowboy culture. You'll see the hats, the boots, but you'll also see the cattle walking down the street. And it's a real thing. And they do it twice a day. See, there's a cool video here. I'll just play this. We can see it. Yeah, but I mean, you can actually go and you can watch it and you can see the cattle walking down the street. The Stockyards is also a cool place because it has, some really good nightlife, restaurants, entertainment, all those things. It's a really cool place to check out. So definitely check out the Fort Worth Stockyards if you want that old Western feel and things like that. Then it's really cool. And then as we zoom out here, we can go look at the cultural district. Now, the cultural district is a place where, it's one of Fort Worth's strongest areas for museums and entertainment and just that urban lifestyle. Now, there's 3 museums that you'll see here. Kimball Art Museum is really the biggest one, which has a bunch of great classic art in it that if you're, into that kind of thing, then you definitely will want to, check out each of them. But then there's also family attractions. You have the Fort Worth Zoo, which we take my daughter quite often. The Fort Worth Botanic Gardens is another one if you're into gardening. The Botanic Gardens, we've had several events there, and it is just a beautiful, beautiful place. Definitely enjoy that. And that area it's very nice. But then you also have places like Dickies Arena. Now, Dickies Arena is a spot where, a lot of people will go for things like concerts, or the NCAA tournament will come to Dickies Arena sometimes and play. So there's just a lot that goes on at that arena. So if you're into concerts or different events like that, then Dickies Arena is a really good one to check out. And then we also have, if we come up a little bit more north here, we have an area called West 7th. So West 7th is, Fort Worth's version of, hey, let's go out, let's party, let's bar hop, the nightlife scene with the restaurants and the coffee shops and all that. That's going to be your West 7th area. So it's extremely walkable and it's good. And I actually have a video on West 7th that I'll actually link here up in the description in the box. So if you guys want to check it out, then check out that West 7th video. It's a good one to look at if you're considering an area like that. And then another one that I wanted to really mention too was the trails. So you have Trinity Park here, which is a huge park that kind of goes through this area, and it connects, the west side and this river here. So there's trails and everything. So you can ride on the trails, kind of get your exercise in, get your fresh air, things like that. It's a real good spot to look at. So zooming out here, another spot that we have is TCU. So Texas Christian University is a Division I school. So they have, Division I football. They play in the Big 12, basketball, those things. It's a real good area down there. It's going to be a lot of students, high energy, things like that, but it's real nice. And then you also have the Fairmont and Mistletoe Heights neighborhoods that are in here that are some older homes, but they got the character, and it's quieter, and it's really nice. It's really nice. There's a neighborhood, Magnolia Avenue. So Magnolia Ave is a spot where you're going to get local restaurants, a lot of local restaurants, a lot of coffee shops, some bars, and it's walkable, right? Now, I point out the walkable areas of Fort Worth because there's not a lot of them. Fort Worth is spread out. It's really a car dependent, city. So, that's one, Magnolia Ave. And now that I see it here on the map, and you see it says recently viewed, because I probably recently went there. If you ever are in Fort Worth, you're checking things out, whatever it is, Panther City Barbecue is a spot that you definitely want to check out. My wife and I go here a couple times, and it's we're from Kansas City. We're from the Kansas area. And so we lived in Kansas City for a couple years, and we hadn't found anywhere in Fort Worth or really in Texas in general that kind of matched the Kansas City barbecue. Because, there's always that fight between who has the better barbecue. But Panther City barbecue is a pretty good one. So I would definitely recommend you check that out. I had to call that one out since I seen it on the map for sure. Let me see what else we got here that I want to point out. Anything else down this way? Nope. Didn't mean to zoom out that far. Oh, let me see here where we're going. What I do want to point out, though, is that, there are several lakes also in, the area. So the way I always like to look at Fort Worth is you have your three tiers, right? You have your south, you have kind of your west, or to me, it's the middle, and then you have the north. And so if you look at the south, you have a lake here called Benbrook Lake. Now, Benbrook Lake is a real nice. Benbrook is a suburb of Fort Worth on the south side, and Benbrook Lake is really nice. You can do your fishing, your boating, whatever you want to do there. So that's a lake option there. But then you also have another lake option here in Lake Worth. So you also have Lake Worth there. And then the third one that I want to point out is Eagle Mountain Lake, which is here, which is also another good lake for boating, fishing. If you want to do those type of activities, then you have those options in Fort Worth. It's not, you're not landlocked. You do have some outdoor activities that you can definitely, take part in. Now, looking at West Fort Worth as well, you also have a lot of jobs out there. One of the big employers here is Lockheed Martin. So as you can see, when I pull it up, we have Lockheed Martin headquarters all around. They're going to be a major aerospace and defense employer that, they're a huge employer for the area. And, there's several different campuses all around. So that's definitely, one to kind of be a part of. But Fort Worth's job market in general is a pretty big one. And a lot of those jobs are going to be around, these areas. And speaking of jobs, one of the bigger employers in Fort Worth are going to be our hospitals and our medical district. So right south of downtown, there's Panther Island I was talking about earlier. Right south of downtown, you're going to have the medical district, where you're going to have, places like Cook's Children, which is top ranked. So if you have a child who has those medical needs, or, if you just want to know, like, hey, what are my, medical options or whatever it is, you have them in, Baylor Scott and White, Medical City, like I mentioned, Cook's. So there's a lot of options, UT Southwestern, but you also have it on the employment side as well, that, there's a lot of jobs that flow through our medical district each year. So, those are definitely some good ones to look at. Then the next area I want to take a look at is one that's actually near dear to my heart, and actually where I live, and that's going to be your Alliance Corridor up in North Fort Worth. So you'll hear folks say, Alliance or whatever it is. Now, when they say the Alliance Corridor or the Alliance area, They're talking about a lot of this area right up here. It's a horrible line, but a lot of this area right up here. Now, what this area does is, one, it employs, 73,000 people. What this area really used to be is a bunch of warehouses. And you still will see warehouses spread around. They're actually building a warehouse by my house right now. And, you'll see 575-ish companies kind of all around. So this is a huge employment area, a huge new construction area. You'll see a lot of the houses around here are going to be built in about, let's say, 2020 and on. So you definitely see those, but you'll see jobs for logistics, aerospace, manufacturing, defense, you name it. There's also an airport up here. That's a private airport, but there's, it does a lot of, like FedEx, Amazon, those types of things. You'll see Amazon Distribution Center. BNSF Railroad is up this way. It's a really busy and growing area. You also have, if you're into NASCAR, you'll have, let's see if I can find it without searching for it. I never can though. Nope, I'm gonna have to search for it. But you'll have Texas Motor Speedway. And Texas Motor Speedway is another huge attraction that's a little bit further up, past the Alliance, past the airport and things like that. But it's a good spot to go if you're, really into NASCAR and whatnot. Another attraction that you'll have in this Alliance area is Alliance Town Center. So I can find it. But Alliance Town Center is going to be a shopping, area. So you're going to have your JCPenney, your Best Buy, some food options, Kroger, and HEB right across the street, which if you don't know what HEB is, it's probably the best grocery store in all of Texas. I'm sorry, in all of the world. Honestly, when an HEB goes in somewhere, it's a big deal. It really is. It's a huge grocery store, great prices, great food. And they're actually they're actually putting one over by my house. Let's see. So we have one here. Let me go ahead and mark it so you can see how close, because like they normally don't put HEBs together. So we have one here, and the second one I believe is going somewhere in this area. So it seems very close, but one thing that you will realize if you end up in this area is the infrastructure is still catching up, right? You still have 2-lane highways and things like that, which can, kind of cause a bottleneck. Again, it can be congestion. I can tell you this area right here at about 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock even, gets pretty crazy. Right. So this whole area is really going to be under development. It's really going to, grow. There's a bunch of things coming up. The infrastructure is getting redone. So this whole area is going to see massive changes in the next, I would say, 2 to 3 years. It's not going to be a 10-year project for a lot of it, but, it's going to see a lot of changes. And this Alliance corridor is actually going to, all these changes and, this growth is actually going to spread into suburbs like Justin and like, Justin here, or even North Lake. They're going to see the growth really spread out that way. So if it was me and I'm moving somewhere, I would definitely I would consider this Alliance area, because there's just so much coming. And, the kind of further out that you go in this area, you're going to see more new construction homes, which are, always good. So, yeah. And so that's really what we have for Fort Worth. You have a really spread out area. You have somewhere that is definitely growing, that you can see the growth. It's not something that's just being talked about. It's actually happening. And you have these suburbs as well that are all extremely close, that all have their own things to it. That'll be another video. You have Keller, which has a bunch of different options, which I'll actually link the Keller video that I made here as well. You have places like South Lake, which is a more high-end community, but there's a lot there, like shopping and entertainment, which I'll link this video as well. Which, the suburbs are a completely different map tour. I can go through those at another time, but I just wanted to really highlight Fort Worth and show what Fort Worth has, because it is a huge city that is still a growing city, and it's really figuring itself out at the end of the day. I think the biggest mistake that I see people make is that they think that, Fort Worth is just one big place and everything's the same and it's not Dallas and whatever it is, which they're right. It's not Dallas, and it's not trying to be Dallas. It's really a collection of just different pockets as you kind of look around. All right, guys, so that's Fort Worth on the map, a city with over 1 million people that somehow still feels like a community. And now you can kind of see why. Now, every part of the city has its own character, its own draw, and its own reason for people to actually want to live here. The jobs are spread across the map, the neighborhoods feel completely different than one another, and there's serious money being invested in every direction right now. So if you're serious about moving to Fort Worth or a suburb, give me a call and let's discuss your situation and desires. Now, this call is going to be completely free. And, we can put together a real picture of what your move is actually going to look like so you can get it right the first time. All right, guys. So be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you find these videos helpful. Comment below and let me know where you're actually moving from. I would actually love to really hear that. Well, that's it for this one, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.